My name is Margaret, and at 66 years old, I learned the most painful lesson of my life through a mistake that lasted less than 3 minutes. It was an ordinary afternoon, the kind of quiet day where the house feels too big and the silence stretches longer than usual. I was standing in the kitchen, waiting for the kettle to boil, when my phone vibrated on the counter. A voice message from my daughter, Grace. I smiled without thinking. My daughter rarely sent voice notes anymore. I assumed she was reminding me about dinner or asking if I needed anything from the store. I pressed play. "Ricardo, I swear I can't do this anymore. I can't keep living with my mother." The voice was unmistakably Grace's, but colder, sharper. Nothing like the tone she used when speaking to me. My chest tightened. "She's everywhere, always watching, always asking questions, and the money," she scoffed. "We're wasting so much money on her. I've been checking places outside the city. There's one for $800 a month. Cheap, quiet, perfect." The kettle screamed behind me, but I didn't move. My hands went numb. This was the same daughter I had worked myself sick for. The same child I raised alone after her father vanished the moment he found out I was pregnant. The same girl I had promised a better life, even if it destroyed mine. The message didn't stop. "I already checked the house paperwork," Grace continued casually. "It's still in her name, but Carol says she knows a way. We can transfer it without her realizing. It's not hard when you know the right people." The floor felt unsteady beneath my feet. My house. The house I had built brick by brick over 30 years of scrubbing floors, cleaning bathrooms, and breaking my back so my daughter could wear clean uniforms and go to college. Grace laughed softly. "In a month, she'll be settled somewhere else and we'll finally have peace. No more pretending." The message ended. I don't remember how long I stood there staring at my phone like it had bitten me. My reflection in the dark screen looked older than it had that morning, smaller, betrayed. I had given Grace everything. I had grown up poor, raised by a mother who believed love meant sacrifice. When Grace was born, I was only 18. Her father disappeared overnight. His family slammed doors in my face. But my mother held me and said, "We will raise this child with dignity." And we did. I cleaned houses from sunrise to sunset. I walked Grace to school when we couldn't afford bus fare. I skipped meals so she could have books. I sold my mother's jewelry, then my own, so Grace could go to college. I took loans I knew I'd never fully recover from. All for her. And now she was planning to erase me from my own life. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat on the edge of my bed, listening to the quiet house, replaying her words again and again. Each time the pain changed shape, turning slowly into something else. Clarity. Grace thought I was weak, old, easy to move out of the way. But after 66 years of surviving, I knew one thing better than most. People mistake kindness for blindness. They forget that women like me didn't survive by being foolish. By the time the sun rose the next morning, I had made a decision. And my daughter had no idea what was coming next. Grace believed she was moving me out quietly, but she never imagined I'd already uncovered everything, including the plan she was hiding from everyone. Before I tell you what I did next, you need to understand who I was before that voice message shattered my world. I wasn't always a woman people thought they could push aside. I was raised by a mother who believed love meant endurance. She woke before dawn and stitched clothes until her fingers bled. At night, she would sit beside me and say, "Margaret, family is the only thing that lasts. For family, you give everything." Those words shaped my entire life. When I became pregnant at 18, Grace's father promised marriage one night and vanished by morning. His parents treated me like I was invisible. I remember standing on their porch, holding my belly, while the door closed in my face. That was the day my childhood ended. My mother didn't ask questions. She sold her only gold bangles to buy baby clothes and whispered, "This child will never feel unwanted." And we kept that promise. Grace was a beautiful baby. Wide eyes, constant laughter. I worked cleaning houses while my mother watched her. I earned barely enough to survive, but every dollar had a purpose. Grace came first, always. I remember walking her to kindergarten because we couldn't afford bus fare. Other parents arrived in shiny cars, wearing pressed clothes and perfume. I wore a patched dress and hid my cracked hands behind my purse. But Grace hugged me and said, "You're the best mom in the world." That sentence carried me through years of exhaustion. My days followed the same rhythm for decades. Wake up at 4, make breakfast, walk Grace to school, clean 3 houses until evening, come home, help with homework, cook, and fall asleep with my bones aching. Weekends weren't rest. They were extra laundry jobs, ironing for neighbors, anything to save a few more dollars for Grace's future. When my mother died, Grace was only 8. Before she passed, she held my hand and whispered, "She will take care of you when you're old. Our blood is good." I believed that. I had to. When Grace turned 15, I spent 6 months working extra shifts to give her a birthday party she dreamed of. I ignored the leaking roof. I ignored my own pain. Seeing her smile in that gold dress made everything worth it. Or so I thought. She was brilliant in school. Teachers praised her constantly. Books, uniforms, trips, it all cost money I didn't have, so I worked harder. College nearly broke me. $15,000 a year. I earned $400 a month. I took loans against my house, sold my engagement ring, sold my mother's sewing machine, the same one she taught me how to survive. I told Grace, "You'll never clean houses like I do. You'll sit in an office with air conditioning." Watching her graduate felt like redemption. She cried in my arms and promised I'd never struggle again. For a while, she kept that promise. Then she married Richard. The wedding drained what little I had left. Loans, jewelry, sacrifices I didn't speak about. But I told myself, this is what mothers do. When Richard lost his job years later, everything shifted. Small requests became regular demands. 1,000 here, 2,000 there. I gave without hesitation. That's when the distance began. Phone calls shortened, visits stopped. Concern turned into criticism. You forget things. Living alone is dangerous at your age. I thought it was worry. I was wrong. Because while I was reliving every sacrifice I made for my daughter, she was quietly rewriting my place in her life, from mother to problem. And the house I built for her future had become the prize she wanted for herself. I thought my life story explained why Grace would never betray me, but the next signs proved she'd already started erasing me long before the message ever reached my phone. Looking back now, the signs were always there. I just didn't want to see them. After Richard lost his job, Grace and her husband began calling more often, not to ask how I was, but to ask what I could give. At first, it sounded reasonable. Times were hard, everyone was struggling, and I had been a mother my whole life. Saying no felt unnatural. $1,000 to help with bills, $2,500 for a car down payment, $3,000 to clear credit card debt. Each time, Grace promised it was temporary, but something changed after that last transfer. The warmth in her voice cooled, her visits stopped altogether. Sundays, once sacred family days, became excuses. "We're busy. Work is demanding. We'll come next week." Next week never came. When I called, she always had a reason to end the conversation quickly. Morning meetings, grocery shopping, dinner plans. 5-minute calls replaced hour-long talks. Then came the comments. Soft, sweet, poisonous. "Mom, Richard says you seem forgetful lately." "Are you sure you're okay living alone in such a big house? At your age, accidents happen so easily." I left them off. I told myself she was worried, that this was love, just poorly expressed. One afternoon, I decided to surprise them. I made Richard's favorite pineapple dessert and drove to their apartment unannounced. I heard laughter inside, but it took several minutes for the door to open. Grace's smile looked forced. Inside, her cousin Carol sat at the table, documents spread everywhere. The moment I stepped in, Carol swept the papers into a folder like she'd been burned. I noticed my name. "What paperwork needs my name?" I asked casually. Grace answered too quickly. "Insurance updates, Mom, just routine things." The explanation didn't sit right, but I swallowed my doubt. Soon after, invitations turned into forgetfulness. They'd invite me to lunch and not show up, cancel without telling me. Once, I waited an hour alone at a restaurant, watching families laugh while my phone stayed silent. When I confronted Grace, she brushed it off. "You know how hectic life is." Then they moved into my house. "Just for a month," Grace said. "Our place needs repairs, and it'll be good for you to have us around." I was relieved, hopeful, foolish. From day one, I felt like a guest in my own home. Richard complained constantly. The TV, the internet, the shower pressure. He said the house was too much responsibility for someone my age. Grace began reorganizing without asking, donating my clothes, replacing my dishes, moving my belongings. They whispered when they thought I wasn't listening. Doctors appeared, social workers, specialists I never requested. Grace scheduled everything. During one visit, I overheard a doctor tell Grace, "I'll note mild confusion." I was standing in the kitchen, fully aware, fully present. That's when the fear crept in. Grace started handling my bills, to help. Then she questioned my withdrawals. She suggested I stop driving, stop shopping alone. Little by little, my independence vanished. The most painful moment came when my friend Letitia visited. Grace told her, "Mom's been so confused lately. She even thought night was morning." It was a lie. But I saw pity replace respect in Letitia's eyes. Strangers began showing up. Evaluators, caregivers, people assessing my safety, all arranged by Grace. I wasn't sick. I wasn't confused. I was being documented. And still, I tried to believe this was love. Until one Tuesday afternoon when Grace made a mistake that revealed everything she'd been building behind my back. A mistake that would change my life forever. I thought I was losing control of my life until one voice message revealed the truth. I wasn't declining. I was being removed. That Tuesday felt wrong from the moment I woke up. Grace and Richard left early, whispering in the hallway like they didn't want the walls to hear them. When I asked where they were going, Grace smiled too quickly. "Just work stuff, Mom. Boring things." The house felt heavy after they left. Not peaceful. Tense. Like something was about to snap. Around 3 in the afternoon, I was standing in the kitchen, making chamomile tea to calm the tightness in my chest, when my phone buzzed on the counter. A voice message. From Grace. I assumed she was letting me know they'd be late or asking me to prepare dinner. For a brief, stupid second, I even felt grateful she remembered me. I pressed play. "Ricardo, I can't do this anymore. I seriously can't stand having my mother in this house." My breath caught. Her voice was sharp, annoyed, stripped of every trace of affection she showed me to my face. She's always there, watching, asking questions, and honestly, she's costing us too much. I've been checking places on the outskirts. There's one for $800 a month. It's cheap, quiet, and honestly perfect. The tea kettle whistled behind me, but I couldn't move. $800? The same amount I'd been giving them every month to help with expenses. The message continued, and with every sentence, my heart cracked further. I checked the house documents again. It's still legally in her name, but Carol says that's easy to fix. We can transfer everything without her realizing. It'll cost some fees and favors, but it's worth it. My legs gave out. I sat on the kitchen floor, phone shaking in my hand. So that's what the papers were. That's why my name kept appearing. That's why doctors were writing lies about my mind. Then Grace said the words that destroyed whatever hope I had left. I already spoke to the director of a care home. I told him she has early dementia. He was very understanding. They see this kind of thing all the time. I felt nauseous. She was lying about my mental health. To strangers. To lock me away. Next Tuesday, we'll tell her she has a routine medical appointment. Once she's checked in, we'll have legal control. Carol says with the reports we have, it'll be easy. Reports? Fake reports. Fabricated confusion. And then she laughed. That laugh, light, casual, almost joyful, cut deeper than every insult before it. The best part, she has no idea. She still thanks me for taking care of her. Richard laughed in the background. They sounded happy, satisfied, as if they were planning a vacation, not the end of my freedom. The message ended with them discussing dinner plans. I don't remember how long I sat there. Minutes? An hour? I replayed the message again and again, hoping I'd misunderstood, hoping context would change the meaning. It didn't. That night, I walked through my house in the dark, touching the walls I had painted myself, the door frames where Grace's height was marked as she grew, the kitchen table where we'd eaten countless meals together. This wasn't just my home. It was my life. And my own daughter had decided it was time to discard me. But somewhere between the living room and my bedroom, the pain began to change. The fear hardened. The sadness sharpened. Grace believed I was fragile, infused, easy to control. She forgot who raised her. She forgot what it takes to survive decades of struggle without breaking. By the time dawn crept through the windows, I wasn't crying anymore. I was planning. I dressed carefully that morning, my crimson suit, the one I wore to Grace's graduation. I gathered every important document I owned and slipped them into my bag. Before leaving, I looked around the house one last time. This is not how my story ends, I whispered. And then I walked out, quietly, before Grace and Richard woke up. They thought they had weeks. They were wrong. Grace believed she'd already won. But by the end of that day, I would uncover just how many crimes she'd committed and how much power I still held. I woke up at exactly 5 that morning. Not from an alarm. My body just knew. The same way it had known when to wake for work for decades, when to push through exhaustion, when to survive. But this morning was different. This time, I wasn't waking up to serve someone else's life. I moved quietly through the house, careful not to make a sound. Grace and Richard were still asleep, unaware that the woman they thought was powerless had already made her first move. I dressed with intention, the crimson suit, pearl earrings, light makeup. I wanted to look like myself, not the frail version they'd been describing to doctors and strangers. Before leaving, I wrote a note and placed it on the kitchen table. Left early to handle some personal matters. Back later. Love, Mom. They didn't deserve more than that. My first stop was the bank. Nora, the branch manager, had known me for over 15 years. When she greeted me, she paused, studying my face. "Are you all right, Margaret?" she asked gently. "I need your help," I said, "and I need complete honesty." We went through my accounts together. That's when the truth surfaced. Several inquiries, account access requests, a signed authorization letter supposedly for me, allowing Grace to review my finances. I stared at the signature. It looked like mine, but it wasn't. "I never signed this," I said quietly. Nora compared it to Light ID. The differences were clear. The angle, the pressure, the flow. Her expression changed. "This is serious," she said. I asked her to cancel all existing authorizations immediately, to flag my accounts, to open a new one only I could access. We transferred every dollar I had left, my savings, my pension deposits, to secure accounts. Then I changed something that felt symbolic. I removed Grace as the beneficiary of my life insurance. Instead, I named a foundation that helped abandoned seniors. If she planned to profit from my disappearance, she would be disappointed. My second stop was the county clerk's office. Carol's desk was exactly where I remembered it. When she saw me, her face drained of color. "Oh, Aunt Margaret? Grace didn't say you were coming." "I didn't say either," I replied calmly. I asked questions, simple ones, innocent ones. "What paperwork requires my name?" Her hands shook. That's when I told her the truth. I heard the message. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. I just watched her crumble. She confessed everything: how signatures were forged, how fake medical reports were created, how the house transfer was already drafted. I gave her a choice: fix everything or lose her job and face criminal charges. She chose to cooperate. By noon, every fraudulent document had been invalidated. Copies were placed in my hands. Evidence. My third stop was a lawyer. Attorney Harrison listened without interruption. He didn't pity me. He respected me. He said, "This is elder fraud, and it's serious." We filed civil and criminal complaints: forgery, financial abuse, conspiracy. By the time I returned home, I was exhausted, but something else had replaced my fear. Certainty. Grace and Richard were sitting in the living room, acting normal, laughing at the television. "Hi, Mom," Grace said sweetly. "How are your errands?" "Very productive," I replied, sitting down. I looked at them both and smiled. "By the way," I added casually, "we're having visitors tomorrow morning. Important ones." Richard frowned. "Visitors?" "Yes," I said softly. "People who are going to help us clear up some misunderstandings." That night I slept peacefully for the first time in months. They thought they were in control, but the truth was simple. They had built their plan on the assumption that I would never fight back. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The next morning, my doorbell rang, and the moment Grace saw who was standing outside, her entire world began to collapse. At exactly 10 o'clock the next morning, the doorbell rang. Not once. Firm, deliberate. Grace jumped up from the couch. "I'll get it," she said quickly. "No," I replied, already standing. "I will." My heart was steady, calm in a way I hadn't felt in months. When I opened the door, 3 figures stood there: Attorney Harrison, 2 uniformed police officers, and a public notary holding a leather folder. "Good morning, Miss Margaret," my lawyer said. "We're here as discussed." Behind me, I heard Grace gasp. "What is this?" she demanded. "Who are these people?" "Sit down," I said, not raising my voice. "Both of you." Something in my tone made them obey. Attorney Harrison placed a thick stack of documents on the coffee table. "Miss Grace and Mr. Richard," he began, "we are here regarding serious allegations of fraud, forgery, and attempted illegal appropriation of property belonging to Miss Margaret." Grace laughed nervously. "This is ridiculous. My mother's confused. She's been imagining things." I met her eyes. "You should stop lying now," I said. "It won't help you." The lawyer presented the first document, the forged bank authorization. "Miss Grace, this signature is not authentic. The bank has confirmed it." Grace stammered. "She asked me to help." I pressed play on my phone. Her own voice filled the room. I can't stand having my mother in the house anymore." The color drained from her face. Richard stood abruptly. "This is illegal. You can't play private recordings." One of the officers stepped forward. "Sit down, sir." The audio continued. The care home, the fake dementia, the plan to transfer my house. Grace collapsed onto the sofa. Attorney Harrison then slid another paper forward. "This is a signed confession from Carol Rodriguez, detailing how she forged documents at your request." Grace screamed, "She's lying!" I played the recording of Carol's confession. Silence followed. Then the lawyer revealed the medical evaluation I had completed the day before. Legitimate, professional, undeniable. Miss Margaret is mentally sound. The prior reports were fabricated. Grace sobbed, "We were desperate. We just wanted to help." I stood. "Help?" I asked. "You planned my imprisonment. You laughed about my death." The officer turned to me. "Ma'am, do you wish to proceed with the arrests?" I looked at my daughter, the child I once carried, fed, sacrificed everything for. "Yes," I said. "Proceed." Handcuffs clicked. Grace screamed my name. Richard glared at me with hatred. But I didn't flinch. For the first time, I wasn't choosing love over dignity. I was choosing myself. I thought the nightmare was over, but what Grace did next proved she was willing to destroy my reputation if she couldn't steal my life. I believed the worst was behind me. I was wrong. The house felt peaceful after Grace and Richard were taken away. For the first time in months, I could breathe. No whispers, no surveillance disguised as care, no feeling like a prisoner in my own home. That peace lasted exactly one night. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Unknown numbers, missed calls, voicemails left in harsh, unfamiliar voices. "Your disgrace! How could a mother do that to her own child? You should be ashamed." Confused and shaken, I turned on my computer. That's when I saw it. Grace had gone to social media. Using fake accounts and some real ones, she posted in local community groups, neighborhood forums, even church pages. "My mother has severe dementia," one post read. "She falsely accused us because she doesn't recognize reality anymore. If anyone sees her alone, please contact me. She's not safe." There were photos of me, photos taken without my knowledge, cropped, edited, zoomed in on moments where I looked tired or distracted. Strangers commented beneath them, "Poor woman. How sad when parents turn against their children. She shouldn't be allowed to live alone." I felt physically sick. She hadn't just tried to steal my house. She was trying to steal my identity, my credibility, my sanity, my place in the world. Neighbors began knocking on my door just to check. Old friends avoided eye contact. Some whispered. Miss Rose, who had lived next door for 20 years, came inside with tears in her eyes. "Miss Margaret, Hanu, are you okay?" she asked carefully. I showed her everything. The recordings, the documents, the police report. Her expression changed from concern to fury. "That girl should be ashamed," she said. But the harassment escalated. Anonymous letters arrived in my mailbox. "You raised a monster. Your daughter hates you because you failed as a mother. No one will believe an old woman over her own child." One letter came at 3 a.m, slid under my door. "I hope you die alone." That night I broke. I sat on the kitchen floor, the same spot where I first heard the voice message, and cried until my chest hurt. Maybe I had gone too far. Maybe I should have stayed quiet. Maybe enduring betrayal was easier than fighting it. I picked up the phone to call my lawyer and tell him to stop everything. Then I remembered something. I went to my bedroom and opened a small wooden box I hadn't touched in years. Inside was a letter from my mother. She had written it shortly before she died. "Margaret," it began, "if someone ever tries to use your love against you, remember this. Kindness is not weakness, and endurance does not mean surrender." I read the words over and over. Even your own child does not have the right to take your dignity. Something settled inside me. I wasn't destroying my family. I was refusing to be destroyed. The next morning, I called my lawyer. "Proceed with everything," I said. "All charges. No mercy." A week later, Grace's lies collapsed. The evidence was undeniable. The recordings were real. The forged documents were traced. Grace and Richard requested a settlement to avoid public trial. I agreed, but on one condition. They had to publicly confess everything and clear my name everywhere they had smeared it. Grace thought the settlement would save her, but the confession I demanded would cost her everything she valued most. Grace thought the settlement was her escape. She was wrong. When my lawyer told me Grace and Richard wanted to avoid a public trial, I already knew why. A courtroom wouldn't just expose their crimes, it would expose who they were. And reputation was the one thing Grace still cared about more than money. "They're willing to return the stolen funds," Attorney Harrison explained. "They'll pay damages and agree to no further contact if you drop the criminal charges." I sat quietly for a long moment. Then I said, "I'll agree, on one condition." The lawyer raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "I want a full written confession, signed, public. They must admit I am mentally competent, that they fabricated medical reports, forged documents, and planned to institutionalize me without my consent. And it must be posted everywhere they accused me." Attorney Harrison smiled slowly. "That," he said, "is devastating and completely legal." Grace had underestimated something important. I didn't want revenge driven by anger. I wanted the truth to stand on its own. 3 days later, we met in a conference room downtown. Grace sat across from me, thinner, pale, her confidence shattered. Richard avoided eye contact entirely. The document lay on the table between us. Grace's hands trembled as she read. "This will ruin us," she whispered. "You already ruined yourselves," I replied calmly. She looked up at me, tears in her eyes. "Mom, please, I was desperate. We were drowning in debt." I didn't raise my voice. "For decades," I said, "I gave you everything without asking why you needed it. And when you decided I was inconvenient, you planned to erase me. That wasn't desperation, that was entitlement." Silence filled the room. Finally, Grace picked up the pen. The confession was published within 48 hours, in the same groups where she had smeared me, on the same platforms where strangers had called me insane, in the same community forums where my photo had been shared like a warning. We falsely accused Miss Margaret of mental instability. We fabricated reports and attempted to illegally transfer her property. Miss Margaret is fully competent. Our claims were lies. The response was immediate. Support poured in. Apologies followed. Neighbors brought flowers. Friends returned with shame in their eyes. But Grace's world collapsed just as quickly. Her employer placed her under investigation. Richard lost his promotion opportunity overnight. Their friends distanced themselves. Family members refused to defend them. They had avoided prison, but they couldn't avoid consequence. I received my money back, every dollar they had taken, plus compensation. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was standing in my living room, alone, peaceful, knowing no one could ever question my mind or my truth again. That night, I made a decision that shocked everyone, including my lawyer. I rewrote my will. Every asset, every dollar, the house, all of it, would go to a foundation that protected seniors from family abuse. "Are you sure?" Attorney Harrison asked gently. "It's nearly $500,000 in value." "I'm sure," I said. "I won't reward betrayal with inheritance." Then I made one final choice. I sold the house. the place where I had raised Grace, the place where she had planned my disappearance. I didn't want to die surrounded by memories of betrayal. I wanted to live surrounded by peace. And just when I thought my story was finally settling, Grace reached out to me one last time. I believed the confession was the end, but the letter Grace sent next forced me to confront the hardest question of all. Can forgiveness exist without reconciliation? I didn't open Grace's letter right away. When I saw her name on the envelope, my hands froze. It had been weeks since the confession went public. Weeks since I sold the house. Weeks since I moved into my new apartment. Quiet, sunlit, and free from whispers. Life had begun to feel gentle again. And yet, that single envelope carried the weight of every year I had loved her. I placed it on the kitchen table and walked away. For 3 days, it stayed there, untouched. Every time I passed it, my chest tightened. I wasn't afraid of anger anymore. I was afraid of weakening, afraid that one sentence might pull me back into the role I had finally escaped. On the 4th day, I invited my neighbor Nora over. She sat beside me as I opened the letter. Dear Mom, I know I don't deserve a response. I don't even deserve to be heard. But I need you to know I finally understand what I did. Her handwriting was shaky. Therapy forced me to face something I never wanted to admit. I didn't see you as a person anymore. I saw you as a safety net, a solution, a resource. I swallowed hard. I convinced myself that because you'd always sacrificed for me, you always would, even when it meant destroying you. Tears blurred my vision. I am not asking for forgiveness. I know some things can't be undone. I only hope you are safe, happy, and at peace, because you deserved that long before I ever realized it. The letter ended simply, with regret, Grace. I sat in silence for a long time. Nora squeezed my hand. You don't owe her anything, she said gently. She was right. But forgiveness isn't about owing. It's about freeing yourself from carrying someone else's poison. I wrote back that night. Grace, I forgive you, not because what you did was small, but because holding anger would keep me tied to pain. But forgiveness does not mean forgetting, and it does not mean I can trust you again. I wish you healing, but my life must remain separate from yours. Your mother. Mailing that letter felt like closing a door, not in anger, but in acceptance. Months passed. My new life grew roots. I joined painting classes, learned I loved landscapes, started volunteering at a foundation that helped seniors who'd been abandoned or defrauded by their families. I met people like me, men and women who had given everything to their children only to be discarded when they became inconvenient. Your story gives me hope, one woman told me, tears in her eyes. I thought I was alone. That's when I realized something powerful. What I'd survived wasn't just personal, it was universal. I occasionally heard updates about Grace and Richard through others, financial struggles, job demotions, a marriage strained by blame and regret. But none of it brought me satisfaction, only clarity. Greed had cost them more than money, it had cost them peace. One afternoon, nearly a year later, I ran into Grace at a shopping mall. She looked older, tired, smaller somehow. She approached cautiously. Mom, she whispered, I just wanted to say, I see now that you didn't ruin my life. I looked at her calmly. I didn't punish you, I said calmly. Your choices did. She nodded, gears forming. I wished her well and walked away. That was the moment I truly understood freedom. Not winning, not revenge, but walking forward without needing to love. I thought my story would end quietly. A peaceful apartment, soft mornings, no more fear. But healing has a way of revealing purpose. 6 months after I began volunteering, the director of the Senior Advocacy Foundation asked if I would speak at a small community seminar. "Just tell your story," she said. "People need to hear it from someone who lived it." I almost said no. I had spent my life staying invisible. Speaking felt dangerous, exposing. But then I remembered the letters I'd received from strangers who had read about my case online. This is happening to me right now. I didn't know it had a name. I thought I was crazy. So I said yes. The room held 30 people. Elderly couples, caregivers, social workers, adult children. I stood at the podium, hands shaking, and told the truth, from the sacrifices to the betrayal to the fight back. When I finished, the room was silent. Then one woman stood up. "My son has been telling doctors I'm confused," she said, voice trembling. "I thought he was protecting me. Now I'm scared." Another man raised his hand. "My daughter moved into my house and started handling my finances. She says it's for my own good." I realized then that what happened to me wasn't rare. It was patterned. Abuse doesn't always arrive with fists. Sometimes it arrives with smiles and concern. The foundation asked me to help create workshops, simple guides that taught seniors how to protect themselves. We covered red flags: sudden concern about mental capacity, pressure to sign documents, isolation from friends, accidental missed appointments, control disguised as care. I helped draft a checklist called "Am I Still in Control?" Banks began sharing it. Clinics requested copies. Community centers invited us back. Then something unexpected happened. Local media picked up the story, not as scandal, but as education. I sat in front of a camera, nervous but steady, and said the words that had taken me a lifetime to learn. Love should never require the surrender of your dignity. Messages flooded in from across the country. Some were heartbreaking, some were hopeful. All of them mattered. I started receiving calls from people who were still trapped, afraid to confront their own children, terrified of being abandoned. I never told them what to do. I told them what I learned: that silence is not peace, that age does not erase rights, that love does not demand erasure. One evening, after a long day of calls, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset. I thought about the house I'd sold, the life I lost, the daughter I'd forgiven but released. And I felt something unexpected: gratitude. Not for the pain, but for what it revealed. Because losing everything I thought defined me forced me to discover who I really was. I wasn't just a mother. I was a survivor, an advocate, a voice. And voices, once found, don't disappear quietly. As the sun dipped below the horizon, my phone buzzed with a message from the foundation director. "We've been invited to help draft state guidelines on elder financial abuse. We'd like you involved." I smiled. My life hadn't ended when Grace tried to erase me. It had expanded. I believed I had finally found my purpose, but one final choice remained, one that would define how my story would truly end. The invitation from the foundation's director changed everything. It wasn't just about sharing my story anymore. It was about creating a shield for others, ensuring no senior would feel as powerless as I had. I poured myself into the work, reviewing case files, helping draft guidelines, and speaking at conferences. Every story I encountered mirrored a piece of my own life. Women and men whose children, who once promised love, sought to erase them from money, convenience, or control. Each case fueled me with a fierce determination. I realized my legacy had always been conditional. It was tied to what I gave: my time, my money, my sacrifices. But through this work, I discovered that true legacy is rooted in wisdom, protection, and boundaries, not endless giving to those who would exploit it. One afternoon, as I reviewed a proposed elder protection protocol, I received a call from Nora, my longtime friend and bank manager. "Margaret, I have someone here who could use your guidance," she said. I arrived to find Mrs. Lewis, a woman in her 70s, trembling and clutching a stack of bills and letters. Her daughter had been helping manage her finances, but was now taking control of everything without consent. I sat with Mrs. Lewis for hours, guiding her through steps to regain her accounts, report fraudulent access, and set clear boundaries. Her relief was palpable. "This feels like taking my life back," she whispered, tears in her eyes. And in that moment, I understood something profound. I wasn't just reclaiming my life from Grace, I was reclaiming the lives of countless seniors trapped in similar webs of manipulation. At home that evening, I walked through my apartment. Every corner reflected choice. The artwork I had painted, the books I had selected, the furniture arranged for comfort, not for display. My home was no longer a place tied to fear or betrayal. It was a sanctuary. Yet Grace's shadow lingered. I didn't hear from her directly, but occasional updates through mutual acquaintances reminded me of the collapse her life had endured. Her debts, the failed promotions, the ostracism from friends. It wasn't satisfaction that stirred within me, but reflection. Consequences had a way of teaching lessons more powerfully than anger ever could. One quiet evening, I read her final apology letter once again. The weight of her words had shifted from bitter reminder to a lesson in emotional resilience. "I lost the best mother I could ever have," she wrote. "I hope you find peace." I smiled softly. Peace. That's what I had found. Not revenge, not bitterness, but freedom and dignity. The next morning, I walked through the foundation's garden, sunlight spilling over the flower beds. Seniors were chatting, laughing, and sharing stories. Some were learning for the first time that they had the right to defend themselves, to reclaim their autonomy, to insist on respect. And as I looked around, I realized my life's purpose had been reborn. For decades, I had measured my worth in sacrifices and service. Now, I measured it in impact, in empowerment, in the lives I helped restore. I thought of Grace once more, not with hatred, but with clarity. She had taught me, unintentionally, the hardest lesson of all, that love without boundaries invites exploitation, that giving without protection can destroy both giver and receiver. I knew I would never return to the person I had been before the betrayal. I wouldn't allow it. From that day forward, I made a silent promise. I would live my final years fully, freely, and deliberately, and I would help anyone trapped by those who confuse control with care. I had reclaimed my life, my home, my dignity. But the most extraordinary part of my journey was still ahead, discovering a joy I never imagined possible at 67. At 67, I woke up one spring morning in my new apartment, sunlight spilling across the white curtains I had chosen myself. No one told me what to buy, how to arrange it, or what I needed. It was my space, finally, entirely my own. The small kitchen smelled of fresh coffee, and as I sipped it slowly, I looked out over the gardens of my residential complex. Other seniors were exercising, tending their plants, or chatting quietly. There was a calm dignity here, a community of people who valued independence. I smiled. After decades of giving everything to everyone else, I was learning what it meant to live for myself. That year, I started taking dance classes. Grace had tried to strip me of freedom, but here, moving to music, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. I enrolled in painting classes as well. Landscapes, mountains, flowers. My canvases reflected peace I hadn't realized I carried inside. Some of my paintings were even sold at local art fairs. And the foundation? It became more than volunteer work. it became my mission. I helped seniors recover stolen money, reverse fraudulent documents, and find safe housing. I guided them to reclaim dignity, the very thing Grace and Richard had tried to erase from me. Margaret, one woman told me, you give me hope. I thought there was no way out. And there it was, proof that pain could transform into purpose. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every senior being silenced or exploited. Occasionally, news of Grace and Richard filtered through friends, their marriage strained under the weight of debts and social disgrace. They had lost friends, respect, and opportunities. I felt no joy in it, only clarity that their choices, not my actions, had led them there. One day, 6 months after my settlement, I ran into Grace at a mall. She looked tired, older than her years, regret written across her face. "Mom," she said, voice broken, "please, I understand now. We've paid the price. Credit ruined, jobs lost. Isn't that enough?" I looked at her calmly. "I didn't punish you," I said. "Your choices did. I only defended myself." She looked down, swallowing tears. Can we be family again?" I shook my head gently. "I forgive you, Grace, but forgiveness isn't trust. It doesn't erase what happened. You've learned your lessons. I've reclaimed my life." With that, I walked away toward my balcony, toward the home I had chosen, where I could live freely. The sky was bright, and for the first time in decades, every step I took felt unburdened. That year became a rebirth. I cultivated friendships with people who respected my autonomy. I spent afternoons painting and volunteering. I laughed more than I had in years. And slowly, I discovered a joy that had nothing to do with sacrifice or expectation. I learned something crucial. True love doesn't demand destruction. True respect doesn't require submission. And real strength is not measured by endurance alone, but by the courage to defend your dignity. Grace and Richard became lessons in my life, not sources of bitterness, but reminders of boundaries. That the world didn't need me to punish them. It simply needed me to live well. On quiet mornings, I would sit on my balcony, coffee in hand, watching other seniors move through their days with pride and purpose. Some had come from broken homes, some had been silenced, and I knew that in helping them reclaim their lives, I had found my truest freedom. For 67 years, I had measured my worth by what I could give. Now I measured it by what I could protect, my peace, my dignity, my life. And in doing so, I discovered that it is never too late to be free. I had lost, I had fought, I had reclaimed, and now for the first time, I understood that freedom isn't just surviving betrayal, it's living fully in spite of it.